Hola a todos, yo soy Dani Mora, quien les viene acompañando en este proyecto. Te invito a que vayas por una taza de café y vengas conmigo a que reflexionemos juntos sobre trastornos de pánico, perspectivas clínicas y neurocientíficas. Para esto nos va a estar acompañando desde Italia Gianni Francesetti. Como saben, él es formado en psiquiatría fenomenológica y terapeuta gestáltico. Es profesor adjunto de la Universidad de Turín en el departamento de psicología. Es formador y supervisor internacional. Ha publicado ampliamente sobre psicoterapia y psicopatología, explorando enfoques originales para comprender el sufrimiento clínico desde un punto de vista fenomenológico y de terapia Gestalt, y propone nuevas formas de enmarcar trastornos clínicos concretos. Es codirector del Instituto Internacional de Psicopatología y Psicoterapia Gestalt. Ha sido presidente de la Asociación Europea de Terapia Gestalt, de la Sociedad Italiana de Terapia Gestalt y de la Federación Italiana de Asociaciones de Psicoterapia, donde preside el Comité de Competencias del Psicoterapeuta. Es miembro del Instituto de Gestalt de Nueva York, de la Asociación para el Avance de la Terapia Gestalt y de la Asociación Europea de Psicoterapia y de la Sociedad para la Investigación en Psicoterapia. Vive y trabaja en Turín, Italia. Entonces, vamos juntos a reflexionar sobre este tema que genera muchas inquietudes por todo lo que eso implica, incluso para la sociedad actual. Entonces, ve por una taza de café y, como siempre, disfruta de esta entrevista. Es un gusto para mí retomar esta conversación ahora con una temática totalmente distinta, pero qué placer tan grande tenerlo acá nuevamente, doctor Gianni. ¿Cómo se encuentra?
I'm fine. It's okay. Glad to meet you. Maybe to discuss a bit on one of my favorite topics. So it's okay.
Bueno, entonces sí, claro, y vamos a estar hablando acerca del trastorno de pánico. Voy a comenzar con la primera pregunta, que por supuesto es totalmente general y necesaria, y es: ¿cómo define y conceptualiza el trastorno de pánico y qué factores considera relevantes en su aparición y desarrollo?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I would say that it's not me conceptualizing panic disorder. These are the nosographic systems that we use, like the DSM or others. And my work have been mainly to deconstruct what the nosographic system is building up as a kind of disorder. Anyway, if we start from the DSM, what is very clear is that the panic disorder is a complex clinical situation where there are panic attacks that at the beginning are unexpected. So this is the main definition of panic disorder, because panic attacks can occur in different clinical situations, like in post-traumatic stress disorder, in obsessive compulsive disorder, in phobic situations. So it can happen in many different ways. So when it happens in the panic disorder, when at the beginning they are unexpected. So that means that I am perfectly okay. The situation where I am is not related to a trauma. There is not a phobic object in this supermarket where I am. I'm not obsessed by anything, so I'm just going there to buy my bottle of milk, and suddenly something catastrophic happens. So it is unexpected. This is important. And what is a panic attack? A panic attack is a moment that is defined by the DSM as an acute attack of fear, with a lot of dramatic physical sensations, that, like heart beating or feeling not having enough air to breathe, or some strange sensation on the skin, or maybe dizziness, or many physical bodily symptomatologies. And the point is that this is experienced as a catastrophic event. I have the fear of dying, that's one of the main fear, or the fear of becoming crazy. So this is the way it is conceptualized. So it's usually something happening in a situation that is not so much, that is usually a good moment of life. It's not a moment of tragedy, and this appears. But what is important to say is that all my research and work is to propose another way of considering panic disorders that maybe we will see. And the second point that is important is that what I described, that is described in the nosographic systems, actually has already changed. A good description during the 90s or until 15 years ago. Nowadays, the way panic disorders or panic phenomena, we could say, are appearing have already changed. So psychopathology always changes with the change of societies, culture, and technologies.
Bien, interesante. Ahora, ¿cómo influye la perspectiva fenomenológico-gestáltica en la lectura de los síntomas físicos que reportan los pacientes con pánico, ahogo, taquicardia, mareos, etcétera? ¿Y cómo abordar esa desregulación corporal?
Well, my research started actually in the 90s from a phenomenological and Gestalt perspective. That means, first of all, something very, very simple, that is just to listen to the clients who suffer from that disorder and to consider if we can be satisfied with the conceptualization that we had and that we have usually, that is an acute attack of fear. Actually, this is not very satisfying from many points of view. First, if you consider panic disorders as an acute attack of fear, you are not listening very well to the clients, because the clients are saying, if we explore the experience, they would say, I have the experience that I am dying. And of course, if I have the experience of dying, I will become immediately very scared, terrified of dying. But the very experience, if we pay attention to that, is the experience of dying or of becoming crazy. Anyway, something catastrophic is happening. Indeed, the patients are not going to the psychologist or the therapist. They are going to the emergency room at the hospital, because the experience is a bodily experience of dying. So I started at the time to consider that maybe there is something more than fear. And indeed, I arrived to the conclusion that fear is there as an overwhelming feeling, but is secondary to another core issue of the experience. And there are also other elements that if we consider panic disorders are acute attack of fear, and the research says that we don't have much satisfying results. More or less 1/3 of people are continuing to have panic attacks during the psychotherapy, and there are a lot of relapses after the conclusion of the therapy. So we miss something. Then there are also a couple of biological elements that are saying that there is something else than fear. For instance, we know since 1960s that during a panic attack in panic disorder, there is not an activation of the acts that stimulate the production of cortisol and adrenaline. That is true when there is a danger in the environment. There is a danger, so there is a stimulation of my hypothalamus, hypophysis, and the gland of the surrenal gland with production of cortisol. Here there is not. So it's another biology. Yeah. And also when I am scared because there is a danger, so when there is fear, if I take a benzodiazepine, I will calm down. But the treatment, the pharmacological treatment of election for panic disorder is not the anxiolytic, it is the antidepressant. So, there is something that is not fitting with the idea that panic is fear or just fear. So this was a kind of movement to explore what there is more. And you started the question with the body, maybe we come to that later on, but also the body phenomena in panic disorders have been changed during the last 20 years. Nowadays, we have much more bodily symptomatologies that are not so complex as it was during the 90s. Maybe I have just dizziness, or maybe I have just a kind of uncomfortable and strong sensation in my skin, or maybe I have just the urge to go to the toilet because I feel nausea or need to run to the toilet. So it's more singular bodily elements. This is one difference. The other difference is that when I started to study them, the onset was usually the late adolescence or youth. The peak was around 19, 20 years, so the peak. Nowadays is much earlier. Nowadays the onset of panic phenomena are around 12, 13, 14 years. So it's the pre-adolescence or early adolescence. So there are changes there also about the way we experience the phenomena and when it occurs, it starts.
A ver, y tomando como referencia el título que me propuso, que fue Trastornos de Pánico, Perspectivas Clínicas y Neurocientíficas, quisiera saber qué aporta la perspectiva neurocientífica en su comprensión del trastorno de pánico y qué implicaciones tiene esto para la psicoterapia.
Okay. Well, this is an important point, and before going to the point of neuroscience, I have to say something about something else than fear, something more than fear. What is there? So what I found is that the core issue is not the fear. The core issue is what I called loneliness with overexposure. What does this mean? This means that the core experience in panic disorder is covered by a huge amount of fear, but the core experience is an experience of loneliness and overexposure to the world. If we consider this, some elements start to have meaning. The first is the experience that I said, the client has not the experience of having fear of dying. The first experience immediate is the experience of dying or becoming crazy. It's interesting that these are the two fears appearing there, because these are the two situations that are the radical separation from my community. I can be separated, and so to feel myself lonely and exposed to the world, or if I die alone and exposed to the unknown and separated by my community, my bonds, or if I become crazy, that is another way to be separated from the common and shared world. Another element that starts to have a meaning, if we consider the loneliness as the core issue, is a phenomenon that often, typically, is accompanying panic disorder, that is agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is, agora in Greek is the square, phobia is fear, is that experience of strong discomfort when I find myself overexposed to the world in the middle of the square. That is agoraphobia. So again, agoraphobia is the paradigmatic experience of being alone and overexposed. Another element is that after the start of panic disorder, there is this strange phenomenon that I can maybe go where I had the panic attacks, the supermarket, the highway, doesn't matter where. I can go only if there is somebody with me that I trust. So, in panic disorder, there is the fear that panic arrives, there is the avoidance of some places where the panic occurs in order to control that this won't happen, but there is also the need of being accompanied, the difficulty to remain alone at home, for instance, or outside. And so, if we consider it as an experience of loneliness, it becomes clear the need of being accompanied, because that is supporting me. What is interesting is that if we consider that this disorder is the most sensitive to the presence of somebody that they trust and of loneliness, what is interesting is that why therapists, psychiatrists, and clinicians didn't conceptualize that solitude is implied. But let's keep this question for later on. Another element that starts to have meaning if we consider loneliness is the moment when panic occurs, begins. And because it happens, it was, as I said, until 15, 20 years ago, it was late adolescence. Now it's early adolescence. But anyway, is that range of age that is when we move from what is familiar to the wider world. So there is a movement during the adolescence of separation from the previous belonging, from the family, from my classmates, the school, maybe the place where I live, because of the university I moved in another city. So there is a movement of separation from what is familiar towards the unknown world outside. There is this trajectory. And this trajectory is a moment of vulnerability, of risk, of being alone and overexposed to the world. So if we consider it as an attack of solitude, we can understand why in that phase of life. Of course, it depends. And I called the familiar from where we move the ikos, from the Greek home, and the word from the Greek polis. So it's the movement from ikos to polis. Of course, it depends which ikos, because if it was a safe, supporting ikos, I am more supported in the passage. If it was a traumatic or neglecting or abusive ikos, of course I will feel less support. But it depends also from the world. The more the world is welcoming me, the more I will feel support. The more the world is fragmented, liquid, without offering belonging, without offering a place for me, or the place is dangerous, super dangerous, the more it will be difficult that passage. But this is a trajectory of vulnerability to the loneliness, and this is why, in my understanding, panic disorder starts in that range. Before coming to the affecting neuroscience, I will arrive, but I want also to say, now that we look to this trajectory, that we can understand maybe why until 15 years ago the starting moment was late adolescence, and nowadays is 12, 13, 14 years. Because until 15, 20 years ago, in our Western cultures, at least, of course, the societies and the culture changes in time, but also in geography. But in our societies, until 20 years ago, the passage around 18, 19, and 20 years, it was the passage outside the family, outside the adolescence, and entering into the world. Maybe from the high school to the university, maybe from the school to the job, maybe traveling. That was the moment where the experience of separating from ethos, entering into the polis was most frequent. And that passage was the moment where we were separating from what was taken for granted in the first phase of our life, and we were moving into the world. That was the point of vulnerability. But 15 years ago, as I usually say, a space-time channel entered in our lives. That is the smartphone. That is, let's say, the smartphone is creating a channel between ethos and polis. The boundary between ethos and polis becomes porous or almost disappears. And so since the moment we have a smartphone, we start to be overexposed to the world. I give always an example. When my children, now are in their 30s, were in their room, they were in their room, that's it. Nowadays, when a boy or a girl, 12, 13, 14 years old, is in his or her room, well, we don't know where she is, and we don't know who is there with her, because there is the possibility to be outside into the world, and the world is inside the room with me. So that boundary has almost disappeared. They are overexposed to the world without the mediation of the ethos. So when children arrive to have that smartphone, or we are overexposed to the world with many media, I'm just using this as an example, that means that they start to be exposed without mediation. So they are alone and overexposed. This makes an activation of the panic, let's say, response that we will see in a while. That system that is activated when we are alone and overexposed, as I said. So starting panic disorder earlier than 15 or 20 years ago, and they appear as difficulty to get out from home, to go to school, to enter in the groups of peers. So there are much more difficulties related to the panic that are appearing earlier in life. So my idea is that the panic disorder is not an attack acute of fear, is an attack acute of loneliness when we are exposed to the world. Yes. So now I say something about the neuroaffective sciences because it is connected. I'm sorry, but I had to say this before, okay? Around 10 years ago, I met Jack Pansep, a neuroscientist who developed the affective neurosciences. He's one of the big authors of the last decades in neurosciences. We met and we discussed our mutual understanding of what panic is. And we were so joyful and relieved in discovering that there was another person in the world not reducing panic to fear. Because I was struggling with this mainstream idea that panic disorder is fear. He was struggling against with the idea that fear and panic are the same. They are not. So we had this, let's say, very inspiring and exciting meeting, and we decided to write a paper that then it was published, even though without him, because he died, let's say, the year after we met, and we couldn't write the paper, so it was finished by one of his collaborators. So that paper is, I can share it, and it's an important for me dialogue between clinical perspective and neuroscience. What he said is very supportive for my clinical understanding, because he says there is a neurological pathway that is related to fear. That is not the neurological pathway of panic. This is another, it's different. And in order to, I think I can make it quite clear by using an example of his experiment. The pathway, the neurological pathway of fear is triggered by a danger in the environment. So his experimental device was to have a cage in a room with some white mice inside, and then he put a cat in the room. So immediately in the mice there is the activation of the fear system, because there is a danger. The fear system is activated, and the outcome of the fear system is to fly away or to fight. It is the very well-known mediator of reactions of fear, of danger. In this case, there is an increase of cortisol, benzodiazepine, that are drugs that are reducing the anxiety, are effective. So it's really the fear system. The panic system is not triggered by a danger in the environment. So the device is the experimental device. There is a cage with the mice in a room, and then there is an empty cage in the same room. You don't put any cats, so no danger. But you take one of the mouse and you put in the empty cage alone. So that mouse starts to panicking. The pathways of panic is activated. There is no danger, there is separation. The little mouse is alone, overexposed to the world. So the trigger of panic is not the danger. The trigger of the panic is to be separated and be alone in a situation of overexposure to the world. The outcome is not fly or to run away or to fight. The outcome is the separation call. That means that the mouse starts to call the others in order to feel the connection with the group. This way of communication is the oldest way of communication in mammals. When the evolution passed from reptiles to mammals, the first way of communication of the mammal is the separation call, because it's saving life. If you are separated and overexposed, you are cut off from your community, from your belonging. And this is the root of the panic disorder. Is a deep experience of being overexposed alone without the mediation that our belongings are offering to us. And this is a big difference. So when a client arrives, I'm not looking for what he's scared of. I'm looking from where you are being separated and you are not aware of. So what is the passage of life that you are in? What is the loss maybe that you had in your belongings, in your connection? So it changes completely the clinical perspective changes completely.
Bien, quisiera hacer un paréntesis como para que nos explique un poco qué pasa con el self, con la experiencia corporal, con el campo y la dinámica figura-fondo. ¿Qué pasa en todo esto?
Mm-hmm. Well, about the figure ground dynamic, I described as panic attack in a panic disorder is a kind of rupture, it's a kind of interruption a dramatic interruption. I'm there with my figure, I'm going to buy my bottle of milk in the supermarket, and then suddenly this completely disappeared, this figure, because what is usually supporting me as a ground is somehow collapsing. And if you are on a chair, and your chair, you are not thinking to your chair, you're thinking to me, to what I'm saying. But if your chair will collapse, you immediately will forget of me, and you will try to land without too much danger for your body. So when the ground that is supporting us is collapsing, because it is not supported enough, then the figure that was there is disappearing because the ground becomes figure. So there is a kind of upside down of the figure ground in the right moment of the panic. And what is collapsing are the basic supporting functions of the self that are what usually we don't think of because it's there in the background supporting us in our process of contacting and creating figures that are what is connected in Gestalt terms to the SE, the function, and personality function. So what is supporting me in contacting you is my body right now, my possibility of breathing, my possibility of being rooted enough, and my words are just arriving and flowing from my body. So there is all the bodily support in our process of contacting. And then there is my personality function supporting me, that is, that I take for granted that I have done a lot of experience that I have assimilated of what to do client with panic disorder. I wrote papers and book on that. So there is a lot that is assimilated and I can count on it. So both personality function, id function are supporting me in my process. In the moment of panic attacks, in panic disorder, one of the support is not supporting, somehow is collapsing. And these two functions are not mine. Mine is my ego function that decides, but id and personality function are relational, are field function, are field issues. So if I separate in the process of my life, I'm separating from something that is supporting my id or personality function, and I'm not aware, I will do a step in my going into the world that is not bearable because it's not supported by my id personality functions that are rooted in my belongings. So this is the way we can look to the mechanism, I would say, of the very panic moment.
Bien. A ver, ¿qué habilidades cree que son esenciales en un terapeuta gestáltico para acompañar el pánico desde una mirada que integre esta perspectiva neurocientífica y fenomenológica?
Mm-hmm. When I work, I forget about panic, set, and mice. So that is, for me, a theoretical empowerment because I'm saying about panic disorder something that is minoritarian, that is not the mainstream. So to have the support of neuroscience is supporting my possibility to speak up in my voice and saying, well, be careful, it's not about fear, it's much more about loneliness. But when I work with my client and with my presence, I would say. And for me, what is essential is not to miss the elements of loneliness that are circulating in the relationship. Not to miss them, not to de-evaluate them, and to be like a radar open to the elements of loneliness in the story of the client and in our relationship and also in my story. can come from all this. One of the experience that a therapist can have when a client with a severe panic disorder is arriving is to face an emergency, the need of solving something that is impacting the life, reducing the autonomy, that is there asking for a solution. And one of the feelings of the therapist is to be overexposed to this request and to feel that I'm not enough to afford to face all these emergency and requests. This is not an incompetence of the therapist. This is how the therapist is embodying the field dynamic of panic. I don't feel I'm grounded enough. And when I feel this, I do not de-evaluate. I say to myself, oh, look, I'm in the right place. I'm feeling that being overexposed, not grounded enough. I would say I would need a mediation here. I would need my supervisor here with me dealing with this at the moment. So, the elements of loneliness and overexposure are appearing, are emerging, not only in the client. I would say first, not in the client. First, through the flesh and experience of the therapist. So to pay attention to these elements for me is very important because it gives, I have a frame of understanding. So here has to do with something happening in the life of the client that is not aware, that has to do with loneliness, overexposure, and through my feeling I can feel that. And not to neglect, not to consider that is me not being good enough, not to run away, but to feel, let's say, how I'm experiencing loneliness and overexposure is already a very important orientation and so a therapeutic tool.
Qué interesante. Ahora, la gran pregunta. ¿Cuáles pudieran ser algunas orientaciones para acompañar las experiencias de pánico? Y podría darnos algunos ejemplos clínicos que nos ayuden a ilustrar parte de este proceso.
Well, of course, there are all the elements that are connected. First, let's say in that way, what is supporting me when I work with a client with panic disorder? First of all, it supports me, I would say, all my story of research on that. So I have a lot of background on that experience because it's an experience that the background is falling down, disappearing. So it's important that the therapist has background, has theory, understanding, possibility to wait instead of being taken by the emergency. So to have backgrounds is very important. Another background is to consider that the clients are always bringing the voice of what is happening into the world. So if we had a wave of panic disorder during the 90s, that means that there was a invisible loneliness in the culture and society. And today we know that there was there. If we have a wave of panic phenomena in people around 12, 13, 14, when I meet a girl or a boy with that, I know that she or he is a voice of the world. There is something that is not only a dysfunction of him or her, it's something that is bringing the voice of what is happening in our world. So this is already supporting me a lot because it gives meaning and supports the client too. Because if I look in this way, I'm not leaving the client alone. If I look at him as dysfunctional, I'm leaving him alone. That's it. And then I pay attention to how am I rooted in my body when I am in my client, how I can detect the elements of loneliness circulating through me or in me in a way that I can welcome this in my experience so I make the client more free for me. And then there is also something specific about panic, because usually panic attacks doesn't appear in the session or in the room. It happens, but it's very special. Usually it happens outside, when in the week when there is not the session. So I pay attention with the client. I discuss how I go when the door is closed after the session, where I am for you. When I am for you, when the panic appears, when you are in the highway or in the train, where am I? It's very important, because it's to check and to nourish the belonging of the therapeutic relationship. That is the place of the support and of the healing process. Sometimes I ask my clients to write their experience when the panic arrives, but I took this from our colleagues, cognitive behavioral therapists, but I added one element. You write what you are experiencing for me. So that for me means that I appear being there with them, and then we read it together. And there is a colleague of mine, Nancy Allen Leon, who used this suggestion with one of her clients. And the client, instead of writing, she started making drawings. So when there was an attack, she drew something, and then she brought to Nancy. And Nancy wrote that she was very impressed at the end of the therapy. These drawings were the book, the history of their relationship. It was very clear from those drawings how the therapeutic relationship was developing during the time. So let's say the main issue again is the way we can create a belonging between us. I have many clinical experiences. One comes to my mind that is also, I used it in order to illustrate this passage, because there was this client she arrived with the fear of dying. After some time, she realized that the fear was not the fear of dying, but the fear of dying alone. And then after some months, she arrived very upset and emotionally moved, and she said, I discovered that it's not exactly that I have the fear of dying alone. The point is that I'm so alone that I could die from all my life. So the loneliness, this is very important, is not a loneliness that is in the awareness of the client. Usually the loneliness is denied, unformulated, unnamed. It's something that, because if you recognize it, you will orient on that. But in the panic disorder, this is not really aware, it's not really present. I remember this other client arriving in the office crying without knowing why for months. She was a colleague, and she was a very independent, autonomous colleague, and at a certain point she couldn't sleep alone anymore, she couldn't. And after months of crying with shame, because without knowing why, she started to remember elements of her childhood when she was a good girl, asking never, let's say, support from the mother, always being autonomous, capable to do alone, but denying a loneliness of being overexposed to the things of life without asking for support. But this is usually hidden, unaware. And so the loneliness is more a compass than a feeling that at the beginning was there. This is why nosographic systems are speaking about fear and neglecting loneliness. First, because we are a society that is neglecting the need of the other. We should be cool and autonomous without need and fragilities on one end. On the other hand, also not only in the social level, but also in the biographical level, usually loneliness is neglected or denied. So the work with this disorder is really a journey to discover elements of loneliness and possibilities of connection. Usually these are wonderful journeys.
Sabiendo que los síntomas son tan dramáticos, generalmente aparece un miedo en el paciente a la aparición de un nuevo ataque de pánico. ¿Sí?
Sí.
¿Qué hacemos con eso? ¿Qué es lo más complejo y lo más difícil para poder profundizar un poco y darle lugar a toda experiencia ligada a la soledad?
Yes, one of the elements is indeed that the panic arrives suddenly without expectation. So it strikes without advices before. And so there is the fear that it can happen here or there, we don't know where. And indeed, the limitations of the movements are creative adjustments in order to control a bit what is uncontrollable. Okay, I don't know why it happens, I don't know when it could happen, but at least it happened in the supermarket, so I can avoid the supermarket. To the point that one of my clients was not able at a certain point to get out from the bedroom. He built a toilet into the bedroom because he was not able anymore to get out from the bedroom. So it can be extreme. And so the fear of that it can happen again is connected exactly to the unpredictability of this. So it can happen, we don't know when and how. And this is difficult to manage because we also don't know when and how, and we know that it could happen. So what supports me in that moment is to not to deny this, but almost to normalize it. Yes, you're right, it can happen. What to do if it happens? Let's see what is the background that is implied in what is happening. And usually it's quite easy to find, if you look to loneliness, it's quite easy to connect and to start to give meaning, because from the moment you give meaning to panic, at that moment it becomes immediately more controllable. So if a young girl arrives and told me, oh, I started to have panic attacks, I don't know why, it was 1 month ago, nothing happened bad. On the contrary, I was moving to another house, where the house of my grandmother, because I changed job and city. I can give a feedback there. I can say, yes, everything is good. And at the same time, there was a movement of separation from what was usual from you. How do you experience this? And usually it is just, it's okay, it is what I wanted. Yes, but stepping more on that. And we discovered there that there is something that was, let's say, missed. And to realize this, increase the sense of control of the client. So the support of meaning is one important element. The other support is the support of the body. Okay, what is happening? What happens? Tell me now. Oh, I'm scared that it could happen again. Yes, you are right. So tell me until you can tell me. And oh, my breathing is becoming a bit too high. Okay, so let's be together in this, and maybe you can change this breathing. So there is the support of the meaning, personality function, and the support of the body, it function. So it's a lot of work in accompanying the client into the world. It's not easy, but wonderful journey.
Okay. Doctor Gianni, para cerrar, una puntualización. ¿Cuál es la belleza del ataque de pánico?
I think that the beauty of panic attacks is to come back to our need of the other, to come back to the need of belongings that we have. And of course, this is a prophetic message, because in a society that becomes fragmented, liquid, I would add a bit psychopathic and hysteric, to come back to the need of my belonging, of my true embodied belonging to my community is something I guess that not only our clients need, but this world needs. So the beauty is the prophetic voice of it, and a rebirth in the face of the other instead of the lack of connection with my community. So the beauty of the panic attack is the call, the separation call, as Panzer would say, is the call of for the other. That's the beauty.
Bien, doctor Gianni, muchísimas gracias por compartir con nosotros todo esto tan apasionante. Johnny, también muchas gracias por ser parte y permitir que esta comunicación sea posible también. Bueno, un gran abrazo, doctor Gianni. En algún momento nos veremos, yo sé que sí, y nos vemos en un próximo encuentro si es que pudieran haber. Que esté muy bien. Hasta luego.
Thank you.